Greetings, 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 greetings. It is I, King Clifford Jefferson, a Senator of Godfrey, the fifth Count of Anjou, the son of Folk, the ruler of Jerusalem. I am the reincarnation of King Edgar the Peaceful, which we know here at the Third Temple English Church of England as the Vicar of Christ. It is September 20th, 2024, which is equivalent to the Berber year 2974. I greet you in the name of my queen, Sister Galveston, from the House of Galveston. I greet you in the name of Archbishop Belmont from the House of Belmont. I greet you in the name of all the officers of the Third Temple English Church of England, which is the reformation of the English Benedictine Reform, as reformed under the Vicar of Christ, which we know as King Edgar the Peaceful, or King Edgar the Christ. I want to give special honor to our ancestors, the Anglo-Saxon Berbers, or just simply Berbers, as known throughout time immemorial. This lesson you don't want to miss. For everyone identified by the words or the terms or the names, whatever you choose to call them, Negro, Black, Colored, African, Moor, Anglo-Saxon, all these terms are just terms used in place of the actual name of who the people are, and use in lieu of the why the term was actually used. So the actual term that should be used in regards to the term that we actually use to identify ourselves is simply Berbers. Okay? And we're going to track, based upon the topic of this lecture today, the slavery of the Anglo-Saxon Berbers through this title called The Atlantic Slave Trade of the Anglo-Saxon Berbers. Once again, we're going to track the history and slavery of the Anglo-Saxon Berbers by way of this title called The Atlantic Slave Trade of the Anglo-Saxon Berbers. And we're going to go past or precede the Atlantic slave trade and go back to the origin of the geographical location where the actual events took place, would be West Africa. Okay? And West Africa concerning the Sub-Sahara or the Sahara territory, which they called the Maghreb, which at one time was connected to North America, if you know your history. So today will be a very exciting lecture that no one has done or put together who claim to call themselves scholars. And there are a few. Let's just give you an example. Now, if you're a conscious person and you're really serious about learning about yourself, then you definitely is on you. You definitely is going to be on YouTube. TikTok is not enough information, nor is enough time to actually get an idea of the concept of who you are. YouTube is not actually a proper form nor the proper timeline to get a understanding of who you are. Hell, there's no proper resource to get an understanding of who you are other than your own resource or what we call your own source. And I know a lot of time we use Wikipedia, and people have a problem with that because they claim it's not a source. But one thing that they don't realize about Wikipedia is that the source is only good as its foundation, i.e., where the source comes from. And apparently, the sources that you find on Wikipedia that we don't even show you, you can pull them up on yourself, is actually historical accounts of who we are as the English people, modernly known as, which are originally are the Anglo-Saxon Berbers. So as you can see on the screen, if you're on YouTube and you're conscious about who you are, there's only a couple of places that you can really go to. All right. Main ones are, as you can see, number one, I didn't put it up there. That's just how it came out. You see us, the Third Temple English Church of England. Then you see the official website for the House of Wicked Minds. That's Taj Tariq and the sister who accompanies him. And you see the Canaanite Moors. You see Sarah Seti. You see Sinetta TV. You see Young Elder. R. Kelly, well, he don't have a podcast, but he's up there. 12 Tribes of Israel. As well as you see my noble Archbishop trying to spread the gospel like we were obligated to do. But other than the Third Temple and Archbishop, all the other forms, including R. Kelly, got thousands and thousands and thousands of members watching them, viewing them, politicking on the information that's there. And if you draw the comparison with the information that's delivered here at the Third Temple English Church of England on our platform versus any other form you see on this display, then it shows you how lost you truly are. If you're watching any other platform other than the Third Temple English Church of England and that of Archbishop Belmont, because if you're watching those, the information should be uniformly the same, okay, as required by King Edgar the Peaceful. All right. So if you're watching these channels within the past or the present, and you're watching this podcast tonight from us as for the Third Temple English Church of England, draw your comparison, okay, especially in regards to your salvation, your inheritance, your liberty, your freedom, hell, your citizenship. Because without citizenship, you have neither of those. Okay? So it's very, very important that you take this lesson that you're going to receive today, especially if you are of darker skin color. Okay? Your remedy is here. If you are darker skin complexion and you know your identity based upon what is being told you today, being told to you today, or being taught, okay, versus what you're being taught on the other platforms, because they should also entail your citizenship, your liberties, your freedoms, your rights, your inheritance, your birthright. They must deliver that in a sound package. And the only sound package that I know that exists in this present day is by law. Okay? That's the soundest reflection of any concrete stability, of any something worth seeking in regards to a belief, a wish, a thought, an idea, a concept. Law is the foundation. All right. So as we say, we're as only good as the foundation, not the source. Because if the source doesn't come from that foundation, it's not a valid source. We can all agree. Okay. So without further ado, let's continue let's get on with this marvelous lecture that I have prepared for you. You must pay very close attention to every word that's being said today, as well as the highlighted points that I want you to remember, because it speaks to the totality of the lesson and the depth of this lesson in regards to understanding that you are, in fact, an Anglo Saxon Berber who were enslaved. Whether you want to talk about the Atlantic slave trade or you want to go back to the sub-Sahara slave trade, you were the ones enslaved. And I'm going to prove it to you today. All right, so let's get started. Started. A lot of old information that we're using just to qualify today's lesson. Thank God, Bishop, for being here for moderating. So the first stop is the Berber on Wikipedia. Okay, the first stop we take in this journey in regards to understanding the slave trade is based upon the word or the term or the phrase that's used to identify a group of people. And the word Berber is a nationality based upon the nation of this group of people. Greetings, Brother McGarrett. Welcome. So the word Berber is a noun. The word actually derives in London, if you go back to the family crest and coats of arms. The word or the term Berber derives from London. Okay? I don't think some of you might not have seen that. Let's just pull it up for you. All right? Just pull it up for you. And London, according to Anglo-Saxon history, was actually called Londonwick, contrast to the Roman London, which was called Londinium. Okay? We must know the difference between the term London, which is the name of a place, contrast to the name of a person or a thing. Because a noun is a person, a place, or a thing. You can't have a person or things without a place to put it. That would be synonymous with a geographical location. All right? And what good is having a place and things without people to enjoy them? Those things will be considered what we call this day and time property. Okay? So a lot of people are making claims to property, which actually has to deal with what we call real estate, real property, not physical property or tangible property. We're talking about real property. They fighting over this stuff now. real property, okay, in estate and land, okay? And we're saying and making a claim in the real estate, if you watch my last lesson, in regards to the land, not the commerce done on the land, but the actual land. And we're doing it as a nation based upon their identity as a people identified by the name of the term Berbers, which according to the family crest and coat of arms, which deals with patronage has comes from England. Okay. The history of the name Berber begins with the Anglo-Saxon tribes of Britain. It is derived from the baptismal name meaning son of Barbara. In some instances, the name may have also been a nickname for someone, such as a Moor or Berber, who appeared to be of North African heritage. In such cases, the name is a reference to the Barbary coast of North Africa. This would be Northwest Africa instead of Northeast Africa. Okay? This will be what we call the Maghreb area, which we're going to go in today. All right, we're going to go over to the actual territory. The name Berber as a surname was first found in London. Okay? So the word surname, Berber, originated in London. We know that surnames originated in the Middle Ages. And we know that based upon the people as a population live as a nation, all right, which was identified where Berber would take you to a particular territory in London, right, according to the English history, which is what we make reference to, but is also associated with our brothers and sisters and what we call North Africa today, okay? Because the people in North Africa today normally do not speak English, okay? They speak Arabic, okay, or some other language that originated on that continent. We must be able to make the distinction here. And the distinction comes by way of the teacher. Because I always say, he who writes your books does what? Set your timeline. Time never was when the Berber was not. If the life of the time when the Berber began, the time when the Berber will be what? No more. Okay? So we must understand what's going on. Why is this important? All right. Why is this important? Let's see. Now let's look at Berber people. Because everybody apparently trying to be Berbers. Okay. Everybody trying to be Berbers. So let's look at some images. Greetings, Countess Walker. Okay. Look at all the shades and colors. Everybody is trying to classify as Berbers. Okay. Or take on the identity of Berbers. When you identify with the nationality of a Berber, contrast to the color of a Berber, we have a problem. There's a big problem between the nationality of a Berber and the color of a Berber. Okay? because that makes the distinction between the ethnic group of the Berbers or those who I call themselves Berbers, because all Berbers who call themselves Berbers are not actual Berbers, okay? Based upon the territorial origin of where Berbers come from. All right? Greetings, Countess. All right, so let's get to it, y'all. Now, the reason why we identify with the term Anglo-Saxon Berbers is basically what the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica says about Berbers, because you can use an encyclopedia, you can use unabridged dictionary, you can use a Black Law dictionary, you can use many sources. But the reason why we use this source is because of the origin where the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica was created and by who created the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica. These were Scottish people who were ruled by Scottish monarchs who were ruling on the English crown, who were derived of who were supposed to be ruled by English Anglo-Saxon Berbers, but apparently we lost our identity as a result of what we call abjuration. We lost our citizenship status, which we call subjectivity, which we discussed today. Very important. We're gonna go through all that. So you gotta have a good mind of recall, all right, to follow along, to follow the trail, to follow the path, because you're on a crusade back home. If you don't understand this lesson, then you are still trafficking, being a part of the trafficking of the slave trade, which is still going on today. You are actually part of the slave trade. Everybody else that you see here are identified as Berbers. They agree to be a part of the slave trade. They agree to it. Okay? They agree to it. We, based upon our ethnicity, our nationality, based upon the color of our skin, all these things come into play. But the color of skin is the last resort that we use to identify. All right? We must we need some type of law to qualify it before we depend upon a color of skin. Okay? So if that's the case, let's go to some prejudice to qualify it. All right? Ray Ahmad Hassan, based upon citizenship, heard in the East District Court of Michigan, which is not a new case. We talked about it many times. Question in regards to how United States determine the classification of a person wanting to be called a citizen here in North America. All right? Very important that you comprehend that. Because the main two ethnicities in play today are the Arabs and the Berbers. Okay? The Arabs and the Berbers, because we're talking about the Atlantic slave trade, but the Atlantic slave trade does not involve the Arabs, but involves the Berbers. So what slave trade that we can we go to that involves the Arabs enslaving the Berbers? This is called the Sub-Sahara slave trade. So we're going to that today. And we're going to show you from what existed from the Sub-Sahara slave trade, which originated from the Arabs, based upon the Arab conquest of the Maghreb, which was inhabited by Berbers. And we know that they were the brothers and sisters of the Berbers in England, based upon what the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica said. This is why you had the Crusades. All right? This is why you had the Crusades. I'm going to show you a timeline that you never seen before. Hell, this just came to me yesterday. All right? But it just shows you that the lens in which you build this story is very important, because the lens you might be viewing it from somebody else might be some eyeglasses. It might be a toy camera. It might be a camera with a lens that's broke. All right? The lens that you're looking through here has no flaws. Okay? So He who writes your books or he who tells your story gives you the visuality to be able to see the story without actually going there. Okay? So watch how visible and the clarity and the visibility of the story I tell from a time where we can't go back to physically, but we can go back to mentally. So mentally, you're going to see the story as qualified by this case law in regards to who we are as Anglo, Saxon, Berbers of darker complexion, not lighter complexion, because you got people trying to be Berbers with lighter complexion, but they are not the actual Berbers from the general location where Berbers existed. Because when the Berbers were invaded, they were invaded by lighter people who amalgamated with the Berbers of dark skin complexion, which is the reason why you got light skinned people identifying themselves as Berbers but are not Berbers. Why? According to case law here. Because the case law involving citizenship is based upon two qualifications. One is based upon the color of skin, and one based upon one association with some genetic or genealogical association to some group or some society. Okay? So listen very, very close. Because these are going to be the person we're talking about today in this very case. Consideration of the question leads to the conclusion that petitioner is not eligible for citizenship in the United States. What this case is talking about now is going to be the matter concerning you or other people very soon. Very soon, this will be at your doorstep. If you are a foreign national, all right? If you are a foreign national here in Berberland, okay? You're in the land of Berbers, all right? And if you're not a Berber by the genetic, we ain't even talking about color scheme. We're talking about based upon your association with the group who are classified as Berbers. According to citizenship or the status or the census roll, there are no Berbers here in North America of this color or complexion enrolled as citizens. Okay? But there are a group or a society enrolled as subjects through their incorporation, through their charter, recognized by the states, along with the foreigners or what we call the immigrants who immigrated here. So we're right at home. Yeah, we're foreign nationals to the United States and the States, but according to international law, we're truly nationals here, not like other foreign nationals who come over to this continent and still claim the status as foreign nationals. That's why you got embassies set up. Okay, so let's get on with the lesson. Consideration of the question leads to the conclusion that petitioner is not eligible for the citizenship in the United States. The court is of the opinion that when one seeking citizenship is in fact clearly not white of skin, a strong burden of proof devolves upon him to establish that he is a white person within the meaning of the act. It will be appear that the petitioner's skin is of somewhat darker complexion than that of many Arabs. However, this court, y'all better ask yourself if y'all Moors and Muslims and y'all Arabs, you need to determine are you really truly a citizen, even though your darker skin might be darker than the actual Arabs over there, that skin might be lighter. Especially when it comes to the question of citizenship here in North America, because like I said, it will be at your front door real quick if it hasn't already. However, this court does not rest in its decision on that ground, but rather upon the group that Arabs as a class are not white persons and therefore not eligible for citizenship. In view of the evident intent of Congress, as interpreted by the Supreme Court, and the Things case, which we talked about, all right, I ain't got time to go to today, Supra, the court should be presented with the convincing case before it holds a person of Asiatic stock to be a white person. Apart from the dark skin of Arabs, it is well known that they are a part of the Mohammedan world and that a wide gulf separates their culture from that of the predominantly Christian people of Europe. It cannot be expected that as a class that will readily intermarry with our population and be assimilated into our civilization. The small amount of immigration of these people to the United States is in itself evident of that fact. Okay, let's move down a little further. To summarize the approach which must be followed and deciding whether a particular person applying for citizenship is a white person within the meaning of the statute, that statute meaning the Naturalization Act of 1790, as interpreted by the Supreme Court, is necessary to determine whether the particular group or racial subdivision to which the individual belongs. So if you don't belong to an individual racial group outside of the Naturalization Act of 1790, guess what? You are a foreigner because you're not considered a white person like them. So that what makes you a foreigner, a naturalized person, which has nothing to do with citizenship. It has to do with your allegiance, okay? Which is an act of abjuration, okay? We talked about that yesterday. We're going to briefly talk about it again today, okay? So the Supreme Court, it is necessary to determine first a particular group or racial subdivision to which the individual belongs. And practical effects, proof of this matter, fact is a matter of genealogy. An individual who presents an aberration from the color of skin of a group of which he is a member, such as a light-skinned Chinese or a Japanese or a dark-skinned Anglo-Saxon, I repeat, or a dark-skinned Anglo-Saxon, does not thereby acquire different status under the act from other members of his group. So just because you are dark-skinned or light-skinned and call yourself Anglo-Saxon based upon the color of skin does not prove you are in fact an Anglo-Saxon. Okay? You must associate yourself based on some genetic proof, some genes. Okay? All right? And it does not thereby acquire a different status under the act from other members of his group. So there they said dark skinned Anglo-Saxon contrast to white skin or light skinned Anglo-Saxon, especially in regards to citizenship here in North America. We're not saying we're citizens of North America. We're saying we're subjects of the crown here and what you call it North America. Very important because Anglo-Saxons authority rule the crown and they govern crown land. Okay? Very important for you to understand that. Let's go to 1911 Encyclopedia. Since we're on the topic of characteristics. In spite of the history of foreign conquests, Phoenicians, Greeks, Romans, Vandals, Arabs, and French. The Berbers' physical type and the Berbers' temperament and nationality have persisted since the Stone Age. I like that shot you got, that post you got, Archbishop of the Flintstones. Very nice. All right. The Berbers' physical type and Berbers' temperament and nationality have persisted since the Neolithic times. Pay close attention to that word, Stone Age. That denotes to what we call the Neolithic time. Okay? Write that down. The numerous invasions have naturally introduced a certain amount of foreign blood among the tribes, fringing the Mediterranean, but those farther inland have preserved their racial superiority and to a surprising degree. They're talking about sub-Sahara, all right? Not coastal, talking about the Mediterranean, but you call them Maghreb, all right? All that was occupied by the Umayyad dynasty, which descended from the opposite dynasty, which were descendants of the Arab race who migrated to the Maghreb from the Arabia Peninsula, which will qualify today, okay? Though considerable individual difference of type may be found in every village, the Berbers are distinctly under the present disguise as a white race, and the majority would, if classed in European customs, pass unchallenged as European, because the case law just called the Anglo-Saxon what? Dark-skinned, okay? Dark-skinned. And they're going to identify the Anglo-Saxon Berbers with a government all right, called Witten of the Anglo-Saxons. So not only are the Anglo-Saxons dark-skinned, they got a government. Berbers got a government. The government is ran by dark-skinned people. Their nationality just happen to be Anglo-Saxon Berbers. Okay. So it says, though considerable individuals differences of types may be found in every village. All right, you got nomadics, and you got those who are what we call um, lived within the communities that were not nomadic. Okay, very, very important for you to comprehend that. All right, dark hair and brown or hazel eyes are the rule. Blue eyes, blonde eyes are found, but their frequency have been considerably overstated. Okay, considerably overstated. Right here. The invaders who have mostly affected the Berber race are Arabs. Okay? Write that down. The one most apparent racial ethnic group that has affected the Berbers, they said, are the Arabs. Not alone, though. Another group that affected the Berbers were the Netherlands. Okay? They affect us as well, what we're going to talk about again, because they both took place in the slave trade. Okay? Very important. That's the connection we're going to make. So the Berber race are the invaders who have most affected the Berber race are the Arabs, but the two races with a common religion, often a common government with the same tribal grouping, have failed to amalgamate to any great extent. So that means somebody borrowed one's religion, okay? If it's the same religion. Somebody borrowed somebody's religion, okay? As well as the customs, traditions, rights, liberties, freedoms, etc. Okay? This fact has been emphasized by Dr. R.G. Letham, who writes, pay close attention and paraphrasing. All that is not Arabic in the kingdom of Morocco. All that is not Arabic in French province of Algeria. And all that is not Arabic in Tunis, Tripoli, and Fezzan is what? Berber. The explanation lies in a profound distinction of character. The Arab is a herdsman and a nomad. The Berber is an agriculturist and a townsman. Okay? As I said, they were nomads. The Arab has built his social structure on the Quran, which inculcates absolutism, aristocracy, theocracy. And the Berber, despite his nominal Mohammedanism practices, is a democratic with his Jimya or Wittenmont, which is the Anglo-Saxon government, and his Qanun, which we call the unwritten code, the Magna Carta of the individual liberties as opposed to the community good. So here you have two things about the Berbers that are in common with the Anglo-Saxons, the government and the law. Once again, I repeat, the government and the law. Witten means wise men. Magna Carta is the law or code that they live by as wise men versus living by any means that you can. All right? All right? Which means nomadic. So there we have a source from the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica in regards to the Berbers having a government different from that of the Arabs, as well as laws different from that of the Arabs. Okay? Very important. Now we can move forward with this lesson. All right? Now we can move forward with this beautiful lesson. I hope y'all wrote those notes down I told you to. All right. The Atlantic slave trade of the Anglo-Saxon Berbers. The Atlantic slave trade of the Anglo-Saxon Berbers. All right? That's what we're discussing today. All right? That's what we're discussing today. You're never going to get it like anywhere else, like you're going to have it here today. All right? All this goes back into the history of what we call the Auld Alliance. Okay? We talked about this many times in my prior lessons. The Auld Alliance, all right, which was the alliance between Scotland, France, against England. Okay? Scotland and France against England. Okay? But along with that alliance of Scotland and France, when I say France, I'm talking about Frankish France, all right? You had an alliance made prior to that, it goes back to the Frankish and Abbasid alliance. Once again, the Frankish and Abbasid alliance. Muhammad descended down from the Abbasid of the line. He was born in Medina. Okay, that's on the Arabia Peninsula. All right, we're gonna talk about him today. All right, so everyone, please pay close attention and write these things down. We're gonna first start with the history of slavery in New Jersey. All right, because you didn't have the United States, so you can't deal with the slavery of the United States until we deal with the slavery of New Jersey, because this is where we're at. We're in New Jersey, and we know based upon the origin of geological study of our planet. All right, it says geological history of North America and North Africa at one time was connected. Okay, New Jersey and North America at one time was connected, going back to the Triassic time. All right, geological history of the Earth. We only use the Wikipedia. All right, they got sources, but the sources is only strong as I said. What? It's foundation. Okay, our foundation is the history of the Berbers. So our foundation is strong. All right, it is strong. Let's see how strong it is. The remainder of what was the world ocean known as the Panthalassa, all the seas. All the deep ocean sediments laid down during the Triassic have disappeared through subduction of oceanic plates. Thus, very little is known of the Triassic open ocean. The supercontinent Pangaea was rifting during the Triassic, especially late in the period, but had not yet separated. The first non-marine settlement in the rift that marked the initial breakup of Pangaea, which separated New Jersey from Morocco, okay, are of late Triassic age. In the United States, these six settlements comprise of what we call Newark supergroup. So that means that the area which we call the Atlantic Seacoast, all right, comprises of the territory Newark, what else is it? Jersey City, all the way down to Jersey, was at one time going back to the Triassic. One time were connected. Okay, it's very, very, very important for you to understand that, because Morocco is part of the Maghreb, and the Maghreb was inhabited by Berbers prior to the Arab migration to the Maghreb. Everyone needs to understand that before you can move forward with understanding who you are based upon your identity. All right? You must comprehend that. Without that, you are lost. All right? So let's go to understanding slavery in New Jersey, since we see New Jersey and Morocco was connected. And we're saying that we're not Arabs. We're Berbers, because we're saying Arabs migrated to Morocco, which prior to the Pangea, it was connected. Okay? I didn't write this. Let's move forward. History of slavery in New Jersey. So we're going to start from New Jersey, or we're going to all go all the way across the Atlantic and see that the very people who were enslaved were the Anglo Saxon Berbers, based upon what the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica says. Okay? That the Berbers were Anglo-Saxon because their government was written, and the government of Britain was the government of the Anglo-Saxon. So hell, they must be one and the same. All right. So the history of slavery is very, very important, especially when it comes to New Jersey. Okay. So we're gonna just skip and jump a little bit. All right, on the important points. All right. Slavery in New Jersey began in the 17th century when the Dutch trafficked African slaves for labor to develop the colony of New Netherland. Everybody needs to write that down. You need to write that down. The word Netherland means lowland. Okay? But it was called New Netherland. Okay? New Netherland. In order for you to understand New Netherland, which were inhabited by the Dutch who trafficked us, the Anglo-Saxon Berbers, now called Africans, based upon their status as slaves who were created for labor in the commercial world. All right. Prior to that identity, prior to that condition, prior to that subjectivity, you were a free man because the word Berber means free man. Okay. Let's move forward. Most Dutch and English immigrants entered the colony as indentured servants who worked for a mixed number of years to repay their passage. When they say Englishman, don't be confused. These are citizens who were allowed citizenship based upon the act called Calvin case going back to Elizabeth's settlement. Okay? This is the time of what we call the Tudors. Okay? Who gave or started the rule for the House of Stuart. Okay, let's move forward. Most Dutch and English immigrants entered the colony as indentured servants who worked for a fixed number of years to repay their passage. As conditions in England improved and the numbers of indentured labor declined, British companies trafficked more Africans for needed labor. To promote increasing numbers of the laborers and settlers in order to develop the colony, the colonial government awarded settlers under what they call an head right system. Okay? A head right system. And this head right system was based upon the transportation of slaves in East Jersey and West Jersey in 1704. This is before the United States even came into existence. This was back in 1704. This was called the Slave Regulation Act of 1704 in New Jersey, okay, for East Jersey and West Jersey, which were at that time royal colonies governed under the proprietors who practiced slave trading. So it says in 1704, after East Jersey and West Jersey were unified, the royal colony of the province passed a slave code prohibiting slaves and free blacks from owning property, further restricting Africans and African Americans. Okay? All right, so I'm showing you how your stuff got taken. During the American Revolution, enslaved Africans fought on each side. The Patriot rebels banned the importation of new slaves as the enslaved were transported to the country on British ships. And New Jersey legislature later freed any slave smuggling and set after in parts of. And New Jersey legislature later freed any slave smuggled in after 1776. The British Crown promised freedom to slaves who would leave rebels masters and fight for the British. The number of blacks in Manhattan increased to 10,000 as thousands of enslaved Africans escaped to the British for the promise of freedom. It's very, very important that you comprehend that. Who were responsible for the slave trade of the Africans and African Americans? The Dutch. Okay? The Dutch. That's all we need to go into is the Dutch. Okay? All right? Everybody write that down. And all that had to do with the importation of slaves from Africa. Okay? New Netherland. Now, why is this important? Because you didn't have United States until you had the 13 colonies. And one of the slaves that were a part of the colonies of Virginia was a slave by the name of what we call Bill Lee. Anyone ever heard of him? Bill Lee. He was a Berber, all right, who was now identified as a Moor as a result of his Arab upbringing. Okay? Hell, he probably was enslaved by Arabs and bought by the United States. Let's just see. William Lee or Billy Lee. This was his name. Now watch how his attire or his dress code changes from the time from this time to the time of Revolutionary War, because he was a valet for George Washington. Okay, in the late 18th century. Okay, he was a valet for George Washington. Okay. Now they said they passed the first slave codes in New Jersey in 1704. This is the same time when George Washington and your founding fathers were going through what we call the Revolutionary War. This is the same time they had their government, what they call alternative government, okay, or de facto government running at that particular time. All right. So Willie Lee was an American slave and personal assistant to George Washington. He was the only one of Washington's slaves who was freed immediately by Washington will. So Washington willed that William Lee or Billy Lee being enslaved be free through emancipation based upon the will. It wasn't no law or no legislation. It was based on will. A will. Because he served Washington's side throughout the American Revolutionary War. He was sometimes the picket next to Washington and paintings. Lee was one of the most publicized African Americans of his time. Do everyone see this? I hope y'all see this. Look at the turban. Look at his attire. Okay? Look at that attire. Look at that turban. All right? Now watch how his depiction changes as a result of him being forced to take part in the Revolutionary War as a result of it was really all about slavery and freedom from slavery. That's what it really was all about. Being able to keep your slave to keep making money or give up your slave and lose money. Okay, we must realize what's at stake, especially when you're dealing with these stakeholders, because they're the stakeholders. Okay, and you're the one they got on the stake. All right, we must comprehend. Now, George Washington crossing the Delaware. Look at this person right in front of George Washington. Who is that? That's Billy Lee. Right there, right in front of him. The only black one in the boat. Crossing the Delaware. But he don't have no turban on, do it. Because he amalgamated as a result of the fight. Okay, we must understand what our brothers and sisters had to go through to get along, to go along, and be strong about that until we can get the hell out. All right? Everybody chat thumbs up if they like what they're hearing so far. Okay, let's see. So we understand that slavery here in North America was instituted by who? Everybody know you should have had it wrote down. The Dutch. Okay? The Dutch. And then it was adopted by the colonies, all the colonies. All right, well, we know specifically we're talking about New Jersey because New Jersey was connected to Morocco through the time of what we call the Triassic era, when at the time what we call the Pangea. And it wasn't even called Morocco there. And we know the Berbers goes back to what? The Stone Age, the Neolithic time, which we're going to see today. All right. So we're talking about New Netherland, the one responsible for enslaving the Anglo-Saxon Berbers through the Atlantic slave trade. Okay. And they were not Arabs because Arabs were the one who assisted in the slave trading. They didn't give a damn who they sold for slaves. Okay. You will see that throughout this lecture. Okay. Let's follow along. New Netherland. Please pay close attention. New Netherland was a 17th century colonial province of the Dutch Republic, located on the east coast of what is now called United States of America. They claimed territories extending from the Delmara Peninsula to Cape Cod. Settlements were established in what became the state of New York, then prior to that was called New Amsterdam, New Jersey, Delaware, and Connecticut, with small outposts in Pennsylvania and Rhode Island. Okay? So this is the territory that was a result of the conflicts that they had with the Anglo-Saxons, because this originated through what we call the Anglo and Dutch Wars. The Anglo and Dutch Wars. We must comprehend that. All right? And the Anglo-Dutch Wars, or the wars of the Anglo and the Netherlands, goes back to time immemorial. Okay? Because before you had to do Netherland, you had a Netherland. Okay? You have to comprehend that. I'm taking you here on the east coast of North America, and I'm going to take you to the west coast of North America, and I'm taking you to the east coast of North Africa and show you that they are actually one and the same. That means the people are one and the same. They are Berbers, but they're not Arabs because the Arabs migrated to that area known as what's now called Morocco. Okay? They migrated there. Let's see. So we see the slave trade in New Jersey, which carried on to the United States, which was brought over by the British Crown. All right? They the ones started it. Okay? They started all of this. But this is an ancient war, going back to the 8th century. Okay? So in order for you to comprehend why you're enslaved today, you must go back and find out how the slavery got started, by who started it, and still doing it. Okay? The clarity will never be told by anyone else. All right? You cannot see it by anyone else. So we see that the history and slavery of New Jersey, all right, based upon the trafficking of us as a people, started in the 17th century and started and developed by the Dutch and the colony of New Netherland, importing Africans, black people, whatever you want to call them, based upon the color of skin, from that territory, coastal of Northwest Africa. Not Northeast Africa, Northwest Africa. Very important that you comprehend that. Why? Let's go take a history down to the Netherlands, from where New Netherland is sending down from. Okay? Netherlands. Let's go to the prehistoric times. Because we know in the prehistoric times, you got to go to the Neolithic times. Okay? And when you go to the Neolithic time, dealing with the Stone Age, the Berbers were around. And they were called the Homo sapiens. They were not Neanderthals. Okay? They were not Neanderthals. Okay? Homo sapiens has fossils, and Neanderthals have fossils that prove the remains of the existence of a society, of people. Very important that you comprehend that, especially when you're talking about Berbers, because Berbers are not Neanderthals. Okay? Berbers are not Dutch. Okay? Very important you comprehend that. Prehistory before 800 BC. The oldest human Neanderthal, I didn't say Homo sapien. It said Neanderthal traces in the oldest human Neanderthal traces in the Netherlands, believed to be about 250,000 years old, were found near Maastricht at the end of the Ice Age. The nomadic later Upper Paleolithic Hamburg culture, very important, Hamburg, because from the Hamburg culture, you got the Hamburg Neanderthal, okay, which we'll talk about in a second, around 13,000 to 10,000 BC, all right, and so on and so on. Let's go a little further. All right, we ain't got to go back that far, right? Let's go right. Let's go to the early Middle Ages. All right, we're still talking about Netherland, from where New Netherland got its start from, right? And they go right to who? The Franks. All right, the same people that we talked about when we first opened up, going back to the Old Alliance. All right, the Franks, and they had alliance with who? The Abbasid dynasty, who are the Arabs. Okay, but we're not talking about the Arabs right now. We will in a second. Right now, we're going and dealing with the Netherlands because we know that the Netherlands, through the Atlantic slave trade, enslaved the African people. This might be the best lesson I ever did. Early Middle Ages from 411 to 1000 Anos Dominios in the year of our Lord. After Roman government in the area collapsed in roughly the year 406, the Franks expanded their territories into numerous kingdoms. By 490s, Clovis I had conquered and united all these territories in the southern Netherlands into one Frankish kingdom. Now we know they all was down with the Pope, right? To the Gregorian mission and the conversions of the Anglo-Saxon into their Christianity. We already know this. It's nothing new. Okay? But we're specifically making the connection with Clovis I and Pope and Christianity that they practiced, which was to convert the barbarians. Okay? To convert barbarians. The only one that needs to convert is somebody who have barbaric ways. Okay? That's the only way, that's the only reason for converting somebody. You ever heard of the exorcist? All right? Very, very important. To the north of the Franks, climatic conditions improved during the migration period. Saxons, the close related Angles, Jutes, and Frisians settled the coast. Many moved on to England and came to be known as the Anglo-Saxon. Once again, there were different tribes identifying with the culture that was already there. And based upon the 1911 encyclopedia, the culture that was already there was the culture of Witten and the laws of the Magna Carta, uncoded because it didn't have to be written down. They were living it. And the 1911 encyclopedia said that law and that government was that of Berbers. Not Franks, not Arabs, but Berbers. Not Angles, not Jutes, not Frizzles. They didn't even mention Anglo-Saxon. Okay? Very important. But those who stayed will be referred to as Frisians and their language as Frisian. Okay? Go down a little further. The Frankish Carolingian Empire controlled much Western Europe. In 843, it was divided into three parts: East, Middle, and West Francia. Okay, so we got three things to connect the dots: Netherlands, Clovis the First, and Carolingian Empire. Everybody see the connection. Everybody say it with me. Netherlands, Clovis the First, and Carolingian Empire. And we know we can connect those three to the slave trade. Okay? We can connect those three to the slave trade, and they both go back to what? The Old Alliance. Frankish and opposite alliance. Why is this so? Because it was actually called the Carolingian and opposite alliance. Okay? The Carolingian and opposite alliance. I think I got that here. Right here. Everybody see that? So we can both conclude, we can conclude from that they both had a hand in slavery of the African people. Okay? We can both conclude that. We can all conclude that. It says there was an opposite Carolingian alliance during the 8th and 9th century, effected through a series of embassies, rapprochements, and combined military operations between the Frankish Carolingian Empire and the opposite Khalifa. The opposite Khalifa are those who rule what? The Arabian Peninsula, not the Maghreb, not Northwest Africa, all right, not Sub-Sahara. The only way they got to rule that as a result of their Arab migration to the Maghreb. Do everyone comprehend that? And we know Muhammad descended down or was one of the founders of the opposite Khalifa, which we're going to talk about in a second. But I'm just showing the connection that the opposite Khalifa, which Muhammad descended down, was the foundation for, were in alliance with the Carolingian, and both of the Carolingian and the opposite dynasty were ones who spread Islam around the world. All right. And we also know that they had a hand in slavery. Okay. Because the opposite dynasty were Arabs. All right. Which the Moors descended out from. And it clearly said in the 1911 encyclopedia, no matter where you go, that Arabs are Arabs and Berbers are Berbers. And in Ray Hamad Hassan clearly says that those Anglo-Saxons were dark-skinned. And the 1911 encyclopedia says the government of the Anglo-Saxon, which were light-skinned, dark-skinned people, was Witteman. Okay? You cannot get no clearer than that. So we see the alliance between the Frankish dynasties and the Muslim dynasties, or the Frankish kings and the Muslim rulers. Okay? We're just not talking about it. We're going to see it. All right, as we move forward further on down through this lesson. Let's see. Okay. So the Atlantic slave trade started with the Netherlands or the Dutch. Okay. The Netherlands or the Dutch. All right, very important. And you can't have New Netherland until you go to the original Netherland, which is associated with who? Clovis the First, the Carolingian Empire, and who else they said? Uh, Neanderthal. Neanderthal. So Neanderthal, Clovis the First, and the Carolingian Empire, and we see that the Carolingian Empire, who was the Neanderthals, who were associated with Clovis the First, who was down with the Pope, as was Pope Gregory the First. All right, all of those were the ones who were in conflict with who? The Anglo-Saxons, which according to 1911 encyclopedia were Berbers. Okay? Very important that you comprehend that. So we see that Neanderthal, which are from Netherland, which the New Netherland, which are the Dutch descended down from, which were in conflict with who? The Anglo-Saxons. But they didn't call them the Anglo-Saxon Dutch War. They called them the Anglo and Dutch Wars. Okay? So let's visit this real quick. Anglo and Dutch Wars. The Anglo and Dutch Wars were a series of conflicts mainly fought between the Dutch Republic, between parts of the Dutch Republic and England, later Great Britain. So the Dutch Republic is that war with who? England. Then later, Great Britain. All right, very important you comprehend that. In the mid 17th and late 18th century, the first three wars occurred in the second half of the 17th century over trade in overseas colonies, while the fourth was fought a century later. Almost all the battles were naval engagements. So all the engagements between the Anglo and the Dutch, or the Anglo and the Netherlands, or the Anglo and the Carolingians were fought on seas. We must comprehend what's going on. So now, as a result of those conflicts going back to Clovis the First and the Carolingian dynasties, which were all descended down from Neanderthal, okay, they said that they aligned themselves with the Abbasid dynasty through that alliance back in 777, okay? And the only thing they had in common that they will make alliance was based upon what, everyone? Slave trading. Slave trading. All right. So let's see who were the progenitors of the slave trading methods that they adopted from the true originators of slave traders, which was the Neanderthals, the barbarian, okay, which originated with Clovis the First. And we know Clovis the First was the founder of the Merovingians, who never claimed to be descendant of God like the Anglo-Saxons. Okay, let's see. Background. The English and Dutch were both participants in the 16th century European religious conflict between the Catholic Habsburg dynasty and the opposing Protestant states at the time as the age of exploration dawned, i.e., discovery. The Dutch and English both sought profits overseas in the New World, i.e., North America, right? It was a commercial thing for them. Let's see. Let's see why. The commercial thing for them was the people, because they were the commercial instrument, and i.e. Berbers. Once again, there go the culprits, the Dutch Republic. Okay? The Dutch Republic. We don't need to read no more about them. Let's see who else are affiliated with this slave trading. England, the Tudors. In the 16th century, Queen Elizabeth I commissioned several privateers to carry out long-range attacks against the Spanish Empire. Global interests exemplified by the attacks by Francis Drake on Spanish merchants shipping and colonial possessions, partly to provide a pretext for ongoing hostility against Spain. Elizabeth assisted the Dutch revolt in 1581 against the Kingdom of Spain by signing the Treaty of Nunshoek in 1585 with the new Dutch state of the United Province. Okay? Very, very important for you to understand that. So we see Tudor's participation in it. Then it says the Stuarts. After the death of Elizabeth I, the Anglo-Spanish relations began to improve under James I, and the peace of 1604 ended most privateering action until the outbreak of war the next Anglo-Spanish War during the 30-year War, underfunding that led to the neglect of the Royal Navy. Okay, then it went on down to Charles I. So you see the transition of the domino effect as a result of the commercial effects based upon trading, privateering. All right, that all were associated with the Dutch, Netherlands. Okay, we must comprehend that. Okay, we must comprehend that. So now we understand the players in it. Now we can visit the Atlantic slave trade. All right, so more or open insight. The Atlantic slave trade or the transatlantic slave trade involved the transportation by slave traders of enslaved African people to the Americas. European slave ships regularly used the triangular trade route in its middle passage. Europeans established a coastal slave trade in the 15th century, and trade to the Americas began in the 16th century, lasting through the 19th century. Okay? Lasted to the 19th century. Let's go a little further. During the first wave of European colonization, although many of the initial Atlantic naval explorations were led by the Iberian conquistadors, this is called acquisition, all right? This is called acquisition, or what they call prescription of sovereignty, okay, by way of acquisition of sovereignty. Somebody claiming to be sovereign based upon some newfound discovery of something that actually did not actually belong to them. All right. So the first wave of European colonization, although many of the initial Atlantic naval explorations were led by the Iberian conquistadors, members of many European nationalities were involved, including settlers from Spain, Portugal, France, and England. We know Spain and Portugal are one and the same. Okay, just for all those who want to know that. And France and Netherlands are one and the same. Contrast to England, which is not composed of the actual English people, but of Scottish people posing themselves as the English. The Italian states and the Netherlands. All right, so you got Spain and Portugal, France, and Netherlands, which are actually of the same descendants. All right. And then England, occupied by Scottish monarchs. All right. And then the Italian states, and then the Netherlands. The diversity led Thornton to describe the initial exploration of the Atlantic as a truly international exercise, even if many of the dramatic discoveries were made under the sponsorship of the Iberian monarchs. That leadership later gave rise to the myth that the Iberians were the sole leaders of the exploration. Right? Let's get there. In the 15th century, when the Balkan slave trade were taken over by the Ottoman Empire and the Black Sea slave trade were supplanted by the Crimean slave trade, and closed off from Europe, Spain and Portugal replaced this source of slaves by importing slaves first from the conquered Canary Islands and then from mainland Africa, initially from Arab slave traders via the Trans-Sahara slave trade from Libya. Did you hear that? And then directly from Africa West Coast through Portuguese outposts, which developed into the Atlantic slave trade and expanded significantly after the establishment of the colonies in America in 1492. I got to read that again. In the 15th century, when the Balkan slave trades were taken over by the Ottoman Empire, all right, Ottoman Empire, these are Persians, and the Black Sea slave trade were supplanted by a Crimean slave trade. We know the Ottoman Empire or the Persian Empire invaded what? The 26th dynasty of Berbers, Libyan Berbers ruling under the auspices of what we call the 26th to the 26th dynasty, or what you call or Misnaba Egypt. Misnaba Egypt. Okay, we must comprehend the science here. In the 15th century, when the Balkan slave trades were taken over by the Ottoman Empire, and the Black Sea trade, slave trade were supplanted by the Crimean slave trade and closed off from Europe. Spain and Portugal replaced this source of slaves by importing slaves first from the conquered Canary Islands and then from mainland Africa, initially from Arab slave traders via the Trans-Sahara slave trade from Libya, and then directly from Africa's west coast through Portugal outposts, which developed into the Atlantic slave trade and expanded significantly after the establishment of the colonies of the Americas in 1492. So the Atlantic slave trade that was carried out by Netherlands, all right, stemmed from the trans-Sahara slave trade that was carried by Arabs. Okay, so you got the Netherlands who are associated with who? uh, uh, Carolingian dynasty who had alliance with these Arabs we're talking about now. All right. So we see that the Netherlands had an alliance with the Abbasid dynasty because we know that the Netherlands go back to Clovis I, which were the founders of the Merovingian and the Carolingian dynasty. And the Carolingian dynasty had an alliance with the Abbasid dynasty, which was the Arab dynasty, do what we call the spread of Islam, do what we call the spread of Islamism. All right, which we'll talk about in a second. We made the connection with the Atlantic slave trade and the sub-Sahara slave trade. One slave trade was carried over by the Arabs, and one was done by Netherlands. Do everybody understand that? Hit me a thumbs up in the chat. One was done by Arabs, and one was done by the Netherlands. We know that the Arabs are what we call from Arabia, from the Arabian Peninsula, and we know that the um, Netherlands or the Dutch were the ones who originated in Netherlands. Okay, we must comprehend that to make the connection. Okay, so back to the Anglo and Dutch wars. So we know that the House of Tudors and the House of Stuarts all took a part in the slave trade, all right, because it was brought over to the colonies, all right. We've seen it in New Jersey, 1704, slave acts for Africans. They didn't say nobody else, but Africans, okay, and they inherited from the monarchs of Scotland, all right, and the Scottish monarchs of Scotland got their start from the monarchs of England, de facto ruling under the House of Tudors, such as Henry the Seventh and Henry the Eighth and Elizabeth the First. Okay, we must comprehend that. Everybody, hold that piece for a second. Anglo and Dutch War. So the Anglo and Dutch Wars, which the House of Tudors and the House of Stuart all participated in, all right, they all participated in, originated from a conflict fought between the Dutch Republic and England. Okay? The Dutch Republic and England. All right? So the slave trade, based upon the Atlantic slave trade that was carried out by the Dutch of Netherlands, was a war between England. So it makes logical sense that the slaves will be those of England, right? And that slave trade goes all the way back to sub-Sahara slave trade. All right, that goes with the Arabs, and we know both of those uh, uh, Netherlands and Arabs had an alliance in the 17th century, in the 7th century. Okay, well said, Archbishop. Okay, so where a series of conflicts mainly fought between the Dutch Republic and England. Okay, and Great Britain. Now, what is the Dutch Republic? We all need to understand that before we move forward. Dutch Republic. United Province of Netherlands, officially the Republic of the Seven United Netherlands. Okay? So the Dutch Republic is actually the Seven United Netherlands. Okay? It didn't say New Netherlands, it said United Netherlands. Even though Netherlands goes back to who? Neanderthal, Clovis the First, Carolingian dynasty, who had an alliance with the opposite dynasty, which both had participated in what we call slave trading. And we both know from that conclusion the slaves that they were trading was Anglo Saxon Berbers, as Archbishop stated. So the United Province of Dutch is the United Province of Netherlands, which is also called the Sub-United Netherlands. Does that make sense to everyone? Everyone give me a thumbs up in the chat line. Okay? Very important. So we know that the Netherlands are preceded by someone, right? Who preceded the Netherlands? It says who? The Spanish Netherlands. Isn't that what they said? The Spanish Netherlands descended from or preceded the Dutch or the what they call the Dutch or Netherlands. They were preceded by the Spanish Netherlands. So let's click that real quick. All right. The Spanish Netherlands, historically in Spanish, Flanders, the name Flanders was used as a partial prototo, pars prototo, pars prototo, was the Habsburg Netherlands ruled by Spanish branch of the Habsburg from 1556 to 1714. They were a collection of states of the Holy Roman Empire and the Low Countries held in personal union with the Spanish crown. Everyone see that? Everyone see that? Okay, so who were their predecessors? We must see that. The Habsburg Netherlands. Everyone coming under the title of Netherlands will make their association with what? Neanderthal, Clovis the First, Carolingian dynasty, and slave trading. Okay? So we see Spanish Netherlands, Habsburg Netherlands, Burgundy Netherlands. All right? They all descended down from the same tree. Okay? So let's go to the Habsburg Netherlands and see who preceded them. Habsburg Netherlands. They were preceded by who? The Burgundian Netherlands. Okay? So from Netherlands, you got the Habsburgs. From the Habsburgs, you got from the Netherlands, you got the Spanish Netherlands. From the Spanish Netherlands, you got the Habsburg Netherlands. From the Habsburg Netherlands, you got the Burgundian Netherlands. And from them, who do you get? Let's see. From the Burgundian Netherlands, who did they descend down from? Oh, the counties of Flanders. Anyone who the county of Flanders are? That goes back to Baldwin the First. Anyone who knew Baldwin the First was? Probably you don't, so let's go see. All right. So we just traced that Neanderthal, which was responsible for the Netherlands, not just New Netherlands, but the old Netherlands. And Netherlands is associated with Spain, Habsburg, Burgundian, as well as the counties of Flanders. And what is the counties of Flanders? Let's see. The county of Flanders was a feudal monarchy under the control of Baldwin the First. Baldwin the First. Okay, very important you understand who Baldwin the First is. All right, very important you understand from who Baldwin the First is. Everybody write that name down. All right. So we trace Neanderthal from New Neanderthal to Netherland, and we know from New Netherland to Old Netherland, you had a whole bunch of kingdoms that existed between them two, and they all associated with Neanderthal, Clovis the First, Carolingian, and slave trading. Okay, we can at least make that connection thus far. Okay, now who was Baldwin the First of Margrave? Who is Baldwin the First of Margrave? Very important. Baldwin the First, also known as Baldwin of Iron Arm, was the epithet is the first recorded in the 12th century, was the first Margrave of Flanders, which evolved into the county of Flanders. Very, very important that you comprehend that. Write that name down. At the time Baldwin first appears in the records, he was already a count, presumably in the area of Flanders, but this is not known. Count Baldwin rose to prominence when he eloped with Judith of Flanders, daughter of Charles the Bald, king of West Francia, a Frankish king. So he must be King to Clovis I, king to Clovis I. Judith had previously been married to a Wessex king called Ethelwulf and Ethelbald, who were kings of Wessex, but after the latter death in 860, she returned back to France. So we see the slave trader, i.e., those who descended down from the Neanderthals, all right, who descended down from the Neanderthal who lived in Netherlands, okay, who were all associated with Spain, Portugal, France, okay, even Scotland, now Arab, all right, all these alliances, all these compacts are fighting against our ancestors, the Anglo-Saxon Berbers, who were the kings of Wessex, such as we have here, Ethelwulf. Ethelwulf, do y'all see that? All right, it's very important you understand that Baldwin the First married Judith of Flanders, who was married to Ethelwulf. Why is this important? This is the reason why we get into what we call the Crusade Wars, because the Crusade Wars started when the time the Crusade started at the time of what we call the Kingdom of Jerusalem. And we know the first kingdom of Jerusalem was who? Godfrey of Bouillon. From where? The House of Flanders, where Judas of Flanders and Baldwin the First of Flanders descended down from, who were all kin to Clovis the First. Okay? They were all kindred. How do I know this? Let's look at the House of Flanders. The House of Flanders, also called Baldwins, were a medieval ruling family of Frankish origin. They were founded by Baldwin Iron Arm, the one we were just talking about, who married Judith of Flanders, who was also married to a king of Wessex, Ethelwulf. All right? So we see the House of Flanders, where Baldwin the First of Flanders descended down from. He was a descendant of Frankish kings, not Anglo-Saxon, which were Berbers. Okay? And Baldwin from the House of Flanders, descended down, was the son-in-law of Charles the Bald. The House of Flanders was the first dynasty to transform the county function of the Carolingian Empire into a hereditary fiefdom, the county of Flanders falling under West Francia, created by the Treaty of Verdun in 843. It's very important because, once again, when we go back to the Auld Alliance, who was the Auld Alliance against? The Carolingian and the Abbasid dynasty. So these are Frankish and Arabs aligned together based upon their one profession, which was slave trading. Everybody give me a thumbs up in the chat if you like what you're hearing. Okay? So since we know that the Arabs and the Franks have an alliance, okay? The Franks and the Arabs have an alliance. It's very important to find out why that alliance exists. Okay? Why that alliance exists. Let's go to what we call the Arab migration. Now we know New Jersey and Morocco was connected based upon we've seen going back to the time of the Triassic era. All right, and we know New Jersey is in North America, which is west of Morocco, which is in North Africa. All right, which would make it west of the Arabian Peninsula, where Arabs come from. So the Arabs migrated east from the east to the west to the area what they call the Maghreb. Okay? Very important to understand that. The Arab migrated to the Maghreb involved successive waves of migration and settlements by Arab people in the Maghreb region of North Africa, excluding Egypt, encompassing modern-day Algeria, Libya, Morocco, and Tunis. Now, the 1911 encyclopedia told you that wherever you see in Algeria, Libya, Morocco, and Tunis, that's not Arab, is what? Berber. Okay? It's very important to understand that the Algeria, Libya, Morocco, and Tunis is talking about an area that originally was inhabited by Berbers until Arabs migrated to that territory. That needs to be understood by everyone. Okay? It needs to be understood by everyone. Because along with the Arab migration came the spread of Islam. The spread of Islam spanned almost 1,400 years. The early Muslim conquest that occurred following the death of Muhammad in 632 Circa era led to the creation of the Abbasid Caliphate, expanding over a vast geographical area. All right. Conversion to Islam was boosted by Arab Muslims, forcing expanded over vast territories and building an imperial structure over time. But you must comprehend that. So let's go to the transatlantic Sahara slave trade. All right. Let's go to the transatlantic slave trade. The trans-Saharan slave trade, also known as the Arab slave trade, and didn't say Berber slave trade, it said Arab slave trade. Now we know the Neanderthal, i.e., the Netherlands, people of Netherlands were associated with the slave trade called the Atlantic slave trade, which was based upon the citizens of the Dutch. All right, which we've seen, all right, which in the modern day was carried out by the House of Tudors and the House of Stuart. But they take that all the way back to the Trans-Sahara slave trade as a result of the connection they had through the alliance of the Carolingian and the Abbasid dynasty in the 7th century called the Auld Alliances. Okay? So the Trans-Saharan slave trade, also known as the Arab slave trade, was a slave trade in which slaves were mainly transported across the Sahara. Okay? You hear that? Most were moved from sub-Saharan Africa to North Africa to be sold to the Mediterranean and Middle Eastern civilizations. A small percentage went the other direction. We must comprehend what's going on. Okay? Alongside Black Africans, Turks, Iranians, Europeans, and Berbers were among the people traded by Arabs, with the trade being practiced throughout the Arab world, primarily in Western Asia, North Africa, East Africa, and Europe. Did you hear that? Did you hear that, y'all? They even enslaved the Berbers, okay, who were originally in North Africa, okay, before the Arab migration, all right, through the Muslim conquest of North Africa. We must comprehend that, all right? We must comprehend that connection, all right? We don't need to read no more about that, Sub-Saharan Africa, because we understand that the slave trade was carried out by Arabs, okay? And we know the 1911 encyclopedia says that the government of the Berbers was Witten, which was the government of the Anglo-Saxon. It will only make sense that the Persians who were enslaved were the Anglo-Saxon Berbers, because we know that the French and the Arabs both aligned themselves against who? England, who are the Berbers, according to the 1911 encyclopedia. Okay? All right? So we must comprehend that. All right? So once again, the Arab migration, okay? The Arab migration migrated to the areas known as Algeria, Libya, Morocco, and Tunisia. All right? The process took over several centuries, lasting from early 7th century to the 17th century. The Arab migrants hailed from the Middle East, particularly in the Arabian Peninsula, which later group arriving from Levant and Iraq. Very important for you to understand that because um, uh, the Arabian Peninsula is not North Africa. Okay, very totally different area geographically speaking. Okay, so just get a look at the Arabian Peninsula before we go further. Everybody see that? This is the Arabia Peninsula, an island of the Arabs, or Arabia. It's a peninsula in West Asia, situated northeast of Africa on the Arabian Plate. You hear that? I don't need to go no further. Okay? So when they migrated to the Maghreb, all right, it was based upon conquest. This is when you get into the stories of Baldwin. Let's go back to Baldwin. Baldwin the first of Maghreb, who preceded the Burgundian Netherlands, who was succeeded by uh, Habsburg Netherlands, who was succeeded by what they said Spanish Netherlands, who was succeeded by Netherlands. Okay, it's very important to understand the chain of events. All right, we must understand the chain of events because we know all of those were preceded by Baldwin the First from the House of Flanders. He was a count of Flanders, so it only makes sense that he descended from the House of Flanders. Okay? Very important. So let's go to the House of Flanders and look at all the kings of the House of Flanders. Okay? Before I come to my closing. Baldwin, Iron Arm, Count of Flanders, all right? Baldwin II of Ball, all right? So we see that Baldwin, the Count of Flanders, all descended down from Netherland, which was the home of the Neanderthals, which were associated with the Clovis the First and the Clovis culture, okay? Which were not the same as the Berbers, okay? Very important, which, like I said, according to the Anglo-Saxon 1911 encyclopedia, were Anglo-Saxons, okay? We must comprehend that. If you scroll all the way down from the House of Flanders, you come up with Godfrey of Bouillon, okay? Godfrey of Bouillon, where's he at? Right here. Godfrey of Bouillon. You get into the time of the Crusades. But if you go back before the Crusades, all right, if you go back before the Crusades, you go into Eustace II, the father of Godfrey of Bouillon. Let's see if we can get him. Right here. Is this him? No, let's see. Godfrey of Bouillon. Godfrey of Bouillon's father was Eustace II. All right. Eustace II was married to Ethelred's daughter, Ethelred the Unready. His daughter was Godgiftful. Okay. Eustace II, all right, was the father of Godfrey of Bouillon, the king of Jerusalem. All right. Eustace II's spouse was Golda of England. And Golda of England was the daughter of who? Ethelred the Unready, the son of our Jesus Christ. You see that? How I know our history? And we understand when we talk about Jerusalem, being that Godfrey of Bouillon was from the House of Flanders, all right? We must understand that he was not a true of the Jur house. This is why when you go down to Baldwin II, all right, Baldwin II, the king Baldwin I was another ruler of Jerusalem. You had the House of Flanders, Baldwin I, Margrave of Flanders, who descended down, was the first king, first count of Flanders, which were all counts of the House of Flanders, where Baldwin I of Jerusalem descended down from as well. Okay, what you see here. All right, Baldwin of Jerusalem. Once he passed on, Baldwin II came to rule Jerusalem. All right, Baldwin II. Let's see if I'm right. Successor, King of Jerusalem. Guess who succeeded Baldwin II? Fulk V. All right, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, sir. Fulk V, King of Jerusalem, son of Fulk, God, father of Fulk, father of Godfrey V Caravan Jew. All right there. Fulk V, King of Jerusalem. All right, these are the Jur kings of Jerusalem that you must understand. All right, you must understand. All right, so going back to where were we at? Let's see. At Arab migration. In closing, all right, the Arab migration when they migrated to the Maghreb, all right, it was based upon the spread of Islam as well as the conquest. Very important because we see their track record based upon the alliance of the Carolingian and the Abbasid dynasty. Okay? We see the alliance there, right here. Right there, we see the alliance. All right, we see the alliance. We know that the slave trade that took place uh, do the transatlantic slave trade, what you call sub-Saharan slave trade, was a result of the combination of the Abbasid and the Carolingian kings. All right, in closing, we see there was a combination and a compilation of the Abbasid Carolingian rulers. Okay, the Carolingians goes back to the Neanderthals, and the Abbasids go back to the Arabs. Okay, we have to understand that. Let's go back there and prove it once again. Neanderthal. Netherland. Right there. Clovis the first. All right. So New Netherland was a practice that was carried on from the early history of those who existed in Netherland, which were the descendants of the Frankish kings, which were those who descended down from Clovis I, who founded the Merovingian dynasty, which never claimed to be descendant of God like the Anglo-Saxon Berbers. Okay, because apparently they were at war with God's children, who apparently must have been the Berbers. Okay, they must have been the Berbers. All right. There's no dispute. So we see that the Carolingian and the Abbasid dynasty were those who were the participators in what we call the sub-Sahara transatlantic slave trade. Okay. Let's get there. Trans-Sahara slave trade or the Arab slave trade was a combination of the works of the Arabs and the Carolingians by way of, as they said, the Carolingian and Abbasid alliance. Okay? The Abbasid and Carolingian alliance. And they all go back to the present day problem we have now, which is what we call the Atlantic slave trade, which was carried out by the Dutch of Netherlands, known as the Anglo and Dutch Wars, and its present day. The Anglo and Dutch Wars were carried out and instituted in its present day by the House of Tudors, the House of Stuarts, and your modern day government as it exists today. All right? So, with that, you must understand that you are slaves. You are, in fact, chattel property. Okay? If you don't understand the origin of slavery from where it originated, you won't know how it applies to you here for where it's still being practiced. Okay? So, with that, I hope that the lesson was interesting. I hope that you learned a lot. I hope that you can close the gap on the story concerning the transatlantic slave trade of the Anglo-Saxon Berbers. And with that, I'm going to greet you as I meet you, and that's always in peace